Welcome everyone to the Town of Greater Napanee Special Session of Council for the 25th day of July, 2023. I just want to remind everybody that this evening's meeting is going to be recorded and live streamed on the Town of Greater Napanee's YouTube channel. Having said that, we'll now call the meeting to order. We'll look for a motion to rise and report out of closed session pursuant to section 239 of the Municipal Act. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Hicks. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. I would like to report that in closed session this evening, Council approved the closed session minutes from July 11th, reviewed the licensing extension agreement with Via Rail for the Napanee train station, received for information a confidential human resources report regarding the new performance management process. And I further would like to report that in special closed session on July 20th, Council reviewed a proposal regarding the executive search and transitional staffing plan for the roles of the CAO and treasurer. Having said that, we'll look for a second motion as a result of some discussions in closed session. Look for a motion to move that. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Norrie. As a result of discussions in closed session, that Council authorized the engagement of Legacy Executive Search Partners, Inc. as a single source award for the procurement of the executive search for both the CAO and treasurer positions. And further, that Council endorsed the transitional staffing plan as presented in closed session on July 20th. Yeah, we got to move in a second on that. Did we call for the vote on that? We did? Oh, okay. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. And I think we need another motion for the next one. Do we, Madam Clerk? We'll look for a motion with respect to Council authorizing the mayor and the clerk to execute the 5-year extension of the license agreement with Via Rail. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Hicks. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. That Council authorized the mayor and clerk to execute the 5-year extension to the license agreement with Via Rail for the Napanee train station as provisionally approved at the June 6th regular meeting of Council. Now we'll move on to the adoption of the agenda. What I would be looking for, we're going to adopt the agenda as amended. What I would be looking for, first of all, is a motion with respect to 12.5, the Circuit Rider Drive extension. We're going to defer that. Sorry? Oh, sorry. It's the air conditioner. I think the folks at home can hear us really well, but it's the air conditioner in this room, which makes it very difficult. So we'll shut the air down. If it gets too warm, we'll get it turned back on. So with respect to their Circuit Rider Drive extension, we're going to defer that report from this evening's agenda, and we are going to address that report prior to, at a special session of the council prior to the end of July. So I'll look for a motion to defer the Circuit Rider Drive extension report on this evening's agenda. Moved by Councillor Martin. Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Norrie. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? That motion is carried. So now we'll look for a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Councillor Pennell. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns with respect to that motion, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? That motion is carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? Seeing none. Next up is deputations. With respect to the deputations, we have a registered deputation from Potentia Renewables proposed Quinte energy storage project. And I believe Jonathan Boutin, and I apologize if I didn't say that right. Batoon, Jonathan, you've got the floor. If you want to come up and bring the folks that you have with you, and I'll get you to introduce the folks that you have with you. I believe that the microphones are on, and I just ask that you speak fairly close to the microphone so the folks at home can hear exactly what's being said.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of council. I'm John Bitoon, project manager at Potentia Renewables, and with me are Shahir Aziz, senior director of Business Development with Hydrostore team, and then his two colleagues with us, Andrew McGillis and Adam Hurley. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be here in front of you today and to talk about the proposed Quinte energy storage project, which is a reliable, large-scale, emissions-free energy storage solutions that is being developed to support the energy transition and the emerging capacity gaps and needs in Ontario. So through this presentation today, we're looking to introduce ourselves, the proposed project, the technology, as well as some of the benefits that this project can bring to the region and to the grid. If we move ahead to the first slide, I'll introduce Potentia Renewables. We are a 100% Canadian independent power producer, headquartered here in Ontario. Our mission is to safely and sustainably develop, construct, own, and operate renewable energy and storage assets in North America. As an Ontario-based company, we have deep local experience here in Ontario, where we've developed numerous power projects. Up to approximately 30% of all operating wind and solar projects in the province have either been developed, financed, constructed, or operated by a member of the Potentia management team. To date, we own and operate approximately 600 megawatts and have approximately 600 megawatts of contracted assets under the construction phase. I'll pass it over to Shahir, who will introduce Hydrostore and provide a technology overview.
Thanks, John. Good evening, your worship and councilors. It's great to be here and be in front of you today to talk about the Quinte Energy Storage Center. As John mentioned, my name is Shahir and I work for Hydrostore as one of the directors of business development. Hydrostore has been around for about 12 or 13 years. It's a Toronto company and we're really focused on two efforts. The first is the development of a technology called advanced compressed air energy storage, or what we like to call it short form for ACASE. And the second is we focus on the development of energy storage projects around the world, including in the United States, Canada, and Australia. Our company really found its light developing our technology for something called long duration energy storage. So you may have heard of other battery projects that provide 2 to 4 hours of duration to the system using lithium-ion batteries and such. And that has a very good place in the electricity system. But using our compressed air energy storage technology, we focus on something called long duration storage, which is really an energy storage solution that lasts for about eight hours or more. To do this, we essentially take air when power is cheap, we compress it underground into a cavern, and when power is expensive, we let that air out of that cavern to generate electricity. This process is emissions-free and can be sited where it's actually needed by the electricity grid. And that's essentially what the technology our company has perfected. Now, our company today is backed by Goldman Sachs and the Canadian Investment, CPBIB, the Canadian Pension Plan Investment Board. And we have about 70 employees that focus on the engineering, development, and deployment of this technology. We have a pipeline of about 700 megawatts, which consists of 2 late-stage projects, one in California and one in Australia, that are currently under development. We also have an extended pipeline of about 4 gigawatts of projects around the world that we are continuing to develop to grow our set of projects. Now, moving onwards to the next slide here. I want to talk to you about compressed air energy storage. So compressed air energy storage has actually been around since the 70s. And so the concept of taking air and storing it underground and then reusing it has been around for many, many years. But the traditional application of that technology, which was done in Germany as well as in Alabama previously, has 2 limitations. One is that it can only be sited, so the project can only be located where there are salt caverns underground. And the second is that in traditional compressed air, you take air, you compress it underground, you actually lose the heat the air had. And so what you end up having to do is when you need that air out of the cavern to generate electricity, you have to end up burning natural gas, which is essentially emissions. So what our company was able to perfect was this process in which we capture the heat and then reuse that heat so that you don't longer need to burn natural gas, and this becomes an emissions-free process. So this is what we've patented and essentially why we call it advanced compressed air energy storage. Now, the first part I focused on was about the salt caverns. We don't need salt caverns because we've taken a process from the hydrocarbon space, from the oil and gas industry, on how they build underground caverns out of hard rock geology and use that to essentially store the air. So again, on the next slide, we'll go through how that exactly works. So looking at this diagram, or maybe you see the slide in front of you, how our system works is that it essentially takes electricity from the grid and uses a compressor and compresses air underground. While that air is being compressed, the heat from that air is captured in heat storage tanks. That heat is then stored there for when we need to actually expand the air. So if you can see from the diagram, the air actually pushes down the air shaft and pushes the water out, and the water goes and the water holds the pressure in something we call hydrostatic compensation. Then when the power is needed, we switch a valve and the water pushes the air down, and the air then gets that heat that was captured previously and runs to the turbine. So through this, we're able to produce a long duration energy storage system using just rock, air, and water, which is an environmentally friendly, emissions-free solution to provide long duration dispatchable capacity. Now, what are the benefits of having a system like this? I keep mentioning sort of long duration and capacity, but when you look at the electricity system, as we move towards net zero, what ends up happening is we have a lot of renewables integration into our grid, for example, solar and wind. We sometimes have a lot of baseload nuclear in our province. That electricity can be captured when we don't need it and stored for long periods of time and then deployed. So what that allows us to do with our long duration system is to turn that intermittent power and turn it into dispatchable capacity. And Ontario today, as you may have seen reported by the IESO, has a need for dispatchable capacity going into the 2030s and beyond. And so that is what our focus of our technology specifically is. When you compare us to, for example, lithium-ion batteries, which are also a great solution for a different set of problems, they're really good when it comes to that shorter duration use for that 2, 3, 4 hours, but we can really kick in for that longer application. In addition to that, in certain instances, for example, such as our project in Broken Hill, Australia, we can also offer an alternative to transmission lines. So where our project is actually going in as a solution to building an alternative transmission line by providing backup power to the town of Broken Hill. With that, John, I'll pass it over to you to talk a little bit more about our specific project.
Thanks, Shahir. If you want to click for the next slide. Excellent. So the Quinte Energy Storage Center is a project being developed by Potentia and Hydrostore. But we are also working in collaboration with Utilities Kingston and the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte, with whom we have executed memorandums of understanding. If you look at the map at the top left, this is a visual reference to where the project is located in Greater Napanee. The project is being sited on an approximately 170-acre property in Ward 1, near the Galt's Corner. This project location provides significant locational value, mainly due to its proximity to the Hydro One Lennox transformer station. This is a strategically important location within Ontario's current transmission network, easily allowing the flow of electricity west or eastwards to fill a capacity gap, the emerging capacity gap within Ontario. The expected interconnection point for the project would be directly into the two Hydro One 230 kV transmission lines that are located just south of the property, leading towards the Lennox transformer station. In 2023, the project team was focused on predominantly securing the project sites, on validating the feasibility of the interconnection of the project into the 230 kV lines, which was validated, and carrying out an environmental critical issues analysis, the results of which show no major environmental concerns, none that cannot be addressed through standard permitting processes. Looking ahead in 2023, the project plans on holding a community open house in the coming months, followed by an agricultural impact assessment that will be completed before the end of this year. Over the course of 2024 and 2025, the project expects to carry out critical feasibility studies to further validate the feasibility of the project. This includes the class environmental assessment, geotechnical studies, hydrogeology and hydrology studies, among a few others. In addition, the project plans on securing all necessary permits, licenses, and approvals over the course of those 2 years, with the goal of being able to initiate constructions by 2026. The construction phase lasts approximately 3 to 4 years between 2026 and 2029, with a target commercial operation date of Q1 of 2030. Now, moving on to the next slide. We will close things off by providing a bit of an overview on the benefits that the project will bring. This is a large-scale development, which will ultimately support over $1.4 billion in GDP over the course of the construction process. The construction and the operations phases of the projects will generate a large number of jobs. During construction, the project expects to directly employ over 600 jobs, while also supporting a large number of indirect and induced jobs, currently estimated to be approximately 2,000 full-time equivalents. During operations, the project will directly employ 40 workers while also supporting additional numbers through indirect and induced jobs. The current estimates being around 195. The project is directly aligned with Canada's and Ontario's net zero ambitions. It will provide critical emissions-free capacity and reliability as fossil fuel resources retire and additional non-emitting resources get brought onto the grid, such as nuclear, wind, or solar. The project estimates to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by a minimum of 90,000 tons per year. Will inevitably also provide ratepayer benefits. The strategic location of the project will also allow or avoid, I should say, the need for extensive and expensive transmission lines within the region and elsewhere in Ontario. I'm being cognizant of time. I'm not sure how long we presented, so I will end things here. And thank you so much for your time and the opportunity to talk about the proposed Quinte Energy Storage Center project.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks very much for doing the presentation. And just hang tight. Is there any questions of council? Go ahead, Councillor Nori.
I'm just not too familiar with this area. I'm an urban councillor, but is this taking any active farmland that's actively being used now, or is it land that's not being used for farming? I'm just curious.
The project is currently sited on agricultural land, yes. We will be, part of the reason that our plan is to conduct the agricultural impact assessment this year is to make sure that we identify any possible impacts that this project during development, construction, operations might have on the neighboring properties.
Thanks, gentlemen. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Calver.
Through you, through you, your worship. How deep down do you go to store this air?
So that's a great question. We go about 600 meters underground. And while that sounds pretty deep, this is again a very well-known process, and there's about hundreds of these caverns around the world.
So how big would the cavern be? Like you have to mine it out, I am assuming?
Exactly. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So there's a mining process we deploy from the mining industry and use that to mine out the cavern. Maybe Andrew, you want to highlight a little bit about the size of the cavern?
Sure. Yeah, so the cavern itself, Councillor, is, you could kind of think about it like a cubic football field, like in terms of total volume, like, 100 meters, 100 meters, 100 meters. It doesn't extend up that tall vertically, but that's volumetrically about how you could kind of visualize it.
Okay, and what kind of pressure are you storing? Any idea?
Sure, thanks. So the pressure is being stored at 60 bar, just under 1,000 PSI.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Is there anybody else? I think, go ahead, Councillor Pennell, and then I'll go to Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Jonathan, could somebody please remind me, you were talking about this will be operational when power is inexpensive, and then you're going to store this power for dispatch. Is that what I heard from you?
Yes, so essentially we end up charging the system and compressing the air underground when it makes sense for us economically, and then repurposing that air to generate electricity when again, it makes sense economically for us.
Okay, thank you. So there will be no batteries on site. It'll be just that it'll be compressed and stored underground until you need to dispatch that air to create power.
Correct. Just to clarify, so there won't be batteries on site, but our system does have turbines, compressors, and other equipment that is utilized for this purpose. But yes, there won't be any physical batteries on site.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So that's, to me, huge, a cubic football field. Where are you planning on putting all of the material that's mined? And is it all limestone? I'm assuming that this is why you selected this site, because it's all rock.
Yeah, that's again, great questions here. So a couple of points there, and I'll let Andrew elaborate a little bit as well. So we actually look for hard rock geology. So specifically in this region, I think we're looking for granite about 600 meters underground to build a cavern out with. We're going to be reusing a lot of that material as much as we can to actually build the water pond area. So as much as we can repurpose on site, and then any excess we'll utilize wherever we can on the site, and where we can't professionally dispose of that. Andrew, anything else on that?
Yeah. As much as my colleague mentioned, it will primarily be used on site. Anything that is excess will be put to a secondary beneficial use, such as given to an aggregate supplier or something like that. I mean, we're not in the business of selling rock. It's a product that we need to get rid of.
Did you have something, Councillor Shank?
So on the west side of that property, there is a bee farm. You're going to have a compressor, and you're going to have turbines, and you're going to have steam exhausts and everything else. So, but you already said you're going to have to do an agricultural assessment and your hydrogeological, because if you're water scarce in that area to begin with, because the dairy farmer that is currently there, he had to dig quite a big pond himself. So your assessments and your studies will answer all those questions, especially the neighbor concerns.
Absolutely. This is something that we specifically plan to assess through those studies. The hydrogeological and the hydrology study will be part of that class environmental assessment that we conduct, and we'll certainly speak to that.
And you'll be talking to the neighbors also about your proposal, especially
Absolutely.
farm there.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Councillor Shank. Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, through your worship. I'm just wondering what size of the property is that you're most likely trying to secure, or have you secured that yet? And out of the size of the property, what is the footprint on the surface that you're going to have? And if you minus both of them, will you be able to lease out the existing land, the leftover land for agriculture?
So in terms of the surface footprint, I may be able to defer to Shahir, but the property itself right now is 171 acres. And absolutely, after the construction of the project and their operations, should there be available land at the northern part of the parcel, then we would be open to essentially allowing it to be farmed.
Thank you. Just to follow up, do you know what a footprint would be, or is it too early days for a footprint on the surface?
Yeah, so we expect the footprint to be roughly 80 acres out of that 170 acres. But we haven't gone through the engineering design to finalize that yet, but approximately that's what we believe it might be.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pennell. Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
Excellent presentation, by the way. Very good. So I'm assuming the Ministry of the Environment and Ministry of Natural Resources are going to be heavily involved in this project as well. And it particularly interests me because of the environmental aspect and no emissions. That's excellent. So now you mentioned there's going to be 40 workers after the construction of the facility. And
40 directly employed, but we do expect approximately 100. Current estimates about 190 indirect and induced jobs as well.
Okay, okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Martin. Is there any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Just one more quick one. Thank you, Your Honor. Your project design life is 50+ years. So without giving away my age, I won't be here when it finally shuts down, quite likely. But what happens when you decommission? Have you ever had to decommission one of these projects? And I'm assuming not, because you're both fairly. But how is that done and safely?
For sure. I think Andrew was probably going to be able to answer this for us.
Sure, thanks. So yes, absolutely. The site has to be decommissioned at end of life. You know, we have decommissioned our first pilot facility. And so that facility was restored back to parkland. And, you know, ultimately the assets on site are removed on site. The mine is flooded and capped off. And then the site is sort of restored back to a flat parcel for residual use.
Thanks, Councillor Hicks. You took the question I had right out of my mouth, so I appreciate that. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Cower.
Just one other question. How much water is required for storage? Like how much, and where are you getting the water from to store?
So the source of the water is yet to be finalized. That'll be part of our engineering process at this time. But in terms of the volume of water, maybe Andrew, you have it.
Sure, yeah. So yeah, don't know what unit you want it in, but a lot of people think about large volumes of water in something called acre feet. And so it uses approximately 500 acre feet of water. And that is the first sort of a one-time fill. Once we run into operations, we don't need any more water. So between the water that is, you know, if you remember your, if any of you have an air compressor and you run an air compressor in your tank, you get a little bit of condensate dripping out. We have big air compressors, so we get a fair bit of water condensate coming out of it. So that supplies for all of our makeup water plus captured precipitation that lands in our pond.
Perfect, thank you.
And Councillor, our efforts are going to be to make sure that wherever we do take the water, it's environmentally responsible and respectful to the other owners in the area.
Great, thanks. Go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, Your Honor. So you're relatively close to Lake Ontario. Was that also a determining factor for drawing water from Lake Ontario?
Well, not necessarily a determining factor. It is a potential source of the water. So this is, you know, initial assessments point towards, you know, groundwater not really being an option because of the amount of groundwater in the area. And so I think Lake Ontario might be a possible source, but, you know, that has yet to be determined through the studies.
Thanks. Is there anything else from council? Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
Did I hear you say 1.4 billion? Is that the estimated cost of the project within the Napanee region?
So the estimated cost of the project is higher than that. The $1.4 billion is specifically the GDP impact to the province of Ontario.
Okay, okay, GDP, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Martin. Is there anything further? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen. It was very informative, and I always like to see new and innovative ideas for generating power. It's always refreshing. So thank you for coming this evening. I'm sure we'll see more of you in the not too distant future, and you know, all the best with your endeavors. So I'll look for a motion to note and receive the presentation of Potentia Renewables proposed Quinte energy storage project. Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Councillor Pennell. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks again, gentlemen.
Excellent.
It was very informative.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you,
members.
councillors.
At this point, we don't have any further deputations that have been that we've been notified of, but we still do offer if there's any unscheduled deputations with respect to anything on our agenda this evening, and we'd be more than welcome to listen to them. They won't be as long as that one, but we'd be more than welcome to listen to them. Seeing none, presentations. 6.1, we have a presentation, I believe, from Laura Dean, from Aird and Berlis law firm, and it's with respect to a code of conduct report. And I believe Laura will be zooming in.
And
Sorry, go ahead, Councillor
and
Shank.
I feel it's just a good cause for me to leave it at this time, and I'll be outside. All right, so when you're done deliberations or anything else like that, somebody can come get me.
I appreciate that, Councillor Shank, and I believe that would be proper. Would that be proper, Madam Clerk, that Councillor Shank leaves the room, or does it matter? Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. Laura Dean, and I believe we may have Laura up on our television screen here, do we? Can you hear me, Laura?
Good evening, Your Worship.
Good evening. Good to see you again, but I say that in the most respectful way. Obviously, if you're here this evening, it's with respect to something that none of us really want to deal with, but we're going to anyways, so go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you. And good evening to members of council and anybody else that is in the audience tonight. My name is Laura Dean, and I am a lawyer with Aird and Berlis. And Aird and Berlis is the Integrity Commissioner for the town of Greater Napanee. And I'm here tonight to present the findings of an investigation, which was conducted pursuant to my authority as the Integrity Commissioner under the Municipal Act. Everyone should have a copy of my report. It was part of the agenda and made public as is required under the Municipal Act. I just plan to quickly go through the results of the investigation and set out the recommendations that are contained in the report. And so to summarize, on May 24th of this year, our office received a formal complaint, and that was made pursuant to the town's code of conduct for members of council and local boards. And the conduct relates to, the complaint relates to the conduct of Councillor Michael Schenk during the May 23rd regular meeting of council for the town. Specifically, the complaint asserts that the member his conduct contravened the code, and I will get into the conduct that is alleged. First, the complaint asserts that the member implied that a particular town employee who is a senior member of town staff was the cause of toxicity in the relationship between town administration and downtown businesses. The complaint further alleges that later in the meeting, the member stated that the town employee who was in attendance at the meeting was sleeping. And in addition, the complaint alleges that at least one person who was sitting close to the member heard him ridicule the town employee when that employee was absent and when asked to answer a question that was posed by a council member. The complaint alleges that this conduct at the meeting was in addition to previous incidents where the member said the town employee was sleeping, and another incident in which the member made a shooting in the head gesture as the town employee was speaking about a particular matter. Now, there are a number of code of conduct provisions that are at issue. The complaint alleges that the comments constituted a contravention of section 5.4 of the code. And all of these are set out in my report. So if you're following along, you can see I won't read out every provision, but essentially section 5.4 provides that a member shall not publicly criticize staff. It also alleged that there was a contravention of section 5.5 of the code, and that deals with the requirement that members respect the role of staff in the administration and business of government affairs, and has a number of sub-provisions, which I won't read out. In our opinion, the complaint also engages section 4.1b of the code, which provides that in all respects, a member shall conduct themselves with integrity, courtesy, and respectability at all meetings of council or any committee, and in accordance with the town's procedure bylaw or other applicable procedural rules and policies. And we also considered section 5.3 of the code, which provides that a member shall comply with the town's council and staff relations policy. So in our report, we transcribed partially the exchange of the meeting dealing with this comment that was made about toxicity. So you can find that there in our report. And I would note that the member's comment about the town employee sleeping cannot be heard in the audio-visual recording of the meeting. And however, it's addressed by the member in a response. And as well, the audio-visual recording does not pick up the alleged ridiculing of the town employee. So as I noted, the member was provided an opportunity to respond to the complaint. The member's response provided that his comment with respect to the toxic environment was in reference to some comments that were made by the CAO in a newspaper article from February 2023. And he alleges that he was checking up on the status of the relationship between staff and downtown businesses, and that his question was merely to understand the existing situation. With respect to the sleeping comment, the member provided that it was very hot in the council chambers on the day of the meeting, and that he was concerned for the health and well-being of the staff member. With respect to ridiculing the town employee, the member has no recollection of those comments. And with respect to the shooting in the head gesture, the member noted that it was an emotional reaction. His response stated that it would be political suicide for him as the representative of people in his area to have proceeded down the path that was being suggested at the meeting. The member says that this was not to suggest that anything would happen to anyone except him. That was the member's response. So just moving along then to our findings, we reviewed the council meeting, reviewed all of the necessary guiding documents, including the complaint and the code, the town's procedure bylaw, the council staff relations policy, and as I noted, the member's response to the complaint, as well as a response from the town employee. So with respect to our findings, I would note typically integrity commissioners do not review conduct of members during meetings unless the conduct is egregious. But I would note that the town's code of conduct, specifically section 4.1b, it expressly provides the integrity commissioner with the authority to consider the behavior of members during meetings of council. So council clearly turned its mind to the idea of providing the integrity commissioner with this authority. And so we have reviewed the meeting and the conduct that took place at the meeting. And so then with respect to our findings, in our opinion, the member's comment that the town employee was sleeping could reasonably be interpreted as a criticism of the town employee. We found that if the member was truly concerned about the town employee's well-being, that there were other ways that this could have been expressed without publicly speculating that the member was sleeping. And the public manner in which the comment was delivered suggests that it was intended to undermine the employee's professionalism or to otherwise mock him in front of council members and members of the public and colleagues. In our view, the member's question with respect to the toxicity combined with this comment, it sought to undermine the town employee. We found that the comment was not respectful, professional, or courteous, and those are key principles that are outlined in the council staff relation policy. And so based on all of the above, we have found that the member contravened sections 4.1b, 5.3, and 5.4 of the code. The section that we were not able to find a contravention of was section 5.5 of the code. And that is the one that has three parts to it, A, B, and C. And we found that neither A, B, nor C had been contravened. Specifically, A says that a member must not falsely or maliciously injure or the reputation of staff members. We didn't find that the member's conduct rose to that level. We also found that it didn't contravene 5.5b, which prohibits members from taking actions or making statements that would be construed as an attempt to influence the independent administration of justice. The comments did not do that. And C, carry out their members are required not to pressure any members of staff to engage in partisan political activities. And again, these comments did not do that. There was, in our view, no violation of section 5.5 of the code. So based on the above, it's our recommendation that council, like I guess stepping back, as the integrity commissioner, we have only the authority to make recommendations. And the penalties that we're able to recommend are only two. One is a reprimand, and the other would be a suspension of remuneration paid to the member for a period of up to 90 days. And as set out in our report, we find that it would be appropriate for council to issue a reprimand and reprimand the member for his conduct at the meeting as it relates to the town employee. The member has not previously contravened the code, and we do not believe that a monetary penalty is required for the purpose of general or specific deterrence in this case. As I mentioned, a draft copy of this report was provided to the member with an opportunity to make final submissions. We did not receive any final submissions from the member, but he is aware of the recommendation that we've made. And as I mentioned, now the report has been made public in satisfaction of the requirements of the Municipal Act. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Dean. If you just hang tight for a bit, we'll see if we have any questions or comments from council. Does anybody on council have any comments or questions for Ms. Dean with respect to the report that we've just received? Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship, through you, Ms. Dean. I'm wondering when we're talking about the remark about being toxicity, obviously for that to get into the paper, that was done previously from a different staff member, and it made it into the paper. So if he was just, if the counselor was just making a question and reused the termination, why is he being held in a conflict for that particular reason, or for what he did?
Sure. And through you, Your Worship, the comment was made. I agree, and it was something that had been said previously in reviewing the council meeting. It was the manner in which the member specifically named the town employee, combined with what appears to be combined with the other incidents. So if it had been maybe just that comment alone, perhaps the analysis would have been different. However, this seems to be part of a continuing series of comments that have been made by this member to this particular staff member. And so it was the fact of the other matters that, to me, made it fairly clear that the staff member had been singled out by this particular counselor.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pennell. Is there any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Nori.
Thank you. Just on that note of toxicity, I don't think your investigation is complete on that. I spent 4 years as the council rep there. I firsthand witnessed everything, and not one person from your office called to see what the history was. He just went by the newspaper. So I have trouble with that part as well.
Thank you, Councillor Nori. Was there a response, Ms. Dean, or no?
Nope.
Great. Is there any other questions or comments from any member of council? Go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Through you, Your Worship. Ms. Dean, so if we remove the toxicity comment and the political suicide gesture made in reference to selling South Fredericksburg Hall, and I distinctly remember that conversation, what we're left with is the comment about sleeping during a council meeting. That's it. That's the only thing that's on the table for discussion right now regarding a reprimand.
well, I wouldn't remove the toxicity because that was part of the complaint as well. But yes, we're looking at the toxicity combined with the pardon me, combined with the sleeping remark.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. Is there any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
This whole thing is particularly troubling. The Integrity Commissioner's report, I mean, that's why we have that system for members to, or for staff to put in a complaint, and she's obviously investigated. I'm assuming, Ms. Dean, you're 100% sure that you've done a thorough investigation of this, and I'm not questioning your work ethic, but I'm just, it just seems like it leans towards one particular person in this, and I don't know if it's a he said, she said, or whatever situation at all, but there seems to be some difference in what was meant versus what was said, and I mean, I guess I'm old school, and I always believed that when you're wrong, you apologize and shake hands, and I'm personally sorry that it came to this, but I just want to make sure that you are personally sure that you've investigated this to the maximum that you could have been and are sure of your findings.
And through you, your worship, yes, I reviewed the audiovisual recording. I received response from both the member and the town employee. It's not our role as the Integrity Commissioner to, for example, interview business owners to determine whether or not there was toxicity. That's not our role to understand. You know, we're not the ombudsman in the situation. We're not doing interviews about council business. We're looking at the code of conduct and the conduct of members at a particular meeting in this case. And so that's what I reviewed. I reviewed the meeting, and I also received input from the member and the town employee, and based on those representations that I received, as well as the audiovisual recording, I came to the conclusions with respect to the contravention of the code.
I think Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Ms.
has
Dean.
a follow-up question. Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
I appreciate that answer. And like I said, I wasn't questioning your work ethic on this project. I do want to make a comment, not necessarily Ms. Dean, but both the subjects in question here. I mean, one is a staff member who's been a long-serving, hardworking member of the community for a number of years, many years. And Councillor Schenk as well has been a long-serving councillor in his Ward 1. And he's always been, in my mind, always had his constituents at heart. And I think the situation just might have got a little carried away. I mean, we all have to be careful what we say and how we say it, because words do hurt. And I'm sure there was some, I just find it hard to punish someone for basically doing what he's done all his life. And also, though, we have to remember that staff.
Just if I may interject, Councillor Martin, you'll have an opportunity to provide a statement once we let Ms. Dean go. The purpose of right now is to basically ask questions of Ms. Dean, but I will give you more than ample opportunity to make a statement once Ms. Dean leaves the Zoom meeting. So if you have a question for Ms. Dean, we'll direct it that way. And if not, then I'll give you an opportunity to make some comments.
Thank you, Mayor. You did say any questions or comments, so I was making comments as well as. Thank you.
Yep. Sorry, Councilor Martin. I know, and you'll be given ample opportunity to make a statement in the very near future. So is there any other questions of Ms. Dean before we release her from the Zoom? I guess all I have, and I think you answered the questions, Ms. Dean, this is basically recommendations from the Integrity Commissioner, are simply that, recommendations, and the ultimate decision is to be made how to deal with this. It is by this council that sits here this evening. I'm correct?
That's correct.
And as the next question would be, or I just want to confirm that we do need to deal with this tonight. This is not something that we can put on the table and decide at our next meeting. It's something that we need to deal with tonight.
That's correct.
And finally, and I don't know, this may sound like a rhetorical question, but with respect to your recommendation of a reprimand, what does that entail? And I know it, I'm sure the Webster's Dictionary can define it very well for me, and I think it probably does. But as far as your suggestions or recommendations with respect to a reprimand, what does that entail and how does that look?
Sure. The way that reprimands have been carried out by other councils, or it's a statement by the council, is essentially stating with respect to the conduct of a particular councillor, council hereby reprimands the member. It's really as simple as that, and that's it's up to council the way that it would like to be drafted. But it really would be a statement sort of officially sort of denouncing the behavior of the member.
Great. No, that's great. Did anything come out of my questions that council wants to clarify or ask Ms. Dean before we let her go? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Dean. We'll allow you to get off the Zoom meeting now and go about your business, and we'll deal with the matter right now forthwith. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening. Bye-bye.
Okay, council, obviously we do now need to have a discussion with respect to how we're going to deal with this. I'm going to make a suggestion, Madam Clerk, and tell me if I'm out of range here, but what I would like to do is we will do a motion to note and receive the report of Ms. Dean first, and then we'll have a discussion with respect to how we want to deal with it, whether it's by reprimand or any other means, and we can have that discussion right now. So I'll look for a motion to note and receive the report from the Integrity Commissioner, Ms. Dean. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Norrie. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Next conversation is how do we want to deal with this, folks? And I'll open the floor up. And Councillor Martin, I apologize for kind of closing off there, but I know you have lots to say, and I'll give you the first opportunity if you wish to go.
Thank you, Mayor, but I don't have a whole lot more to say. I appreciate you shutting me up, actually. But I just want to say, like I said, again, I think the situation is unfortunate. I think our staff, though, do deserve the respect and to be treated properly and in a professional manner. And the only thing I can say is I don't believe Councillor Shank did anything intentional, maybe, but that's just my observation of that night. And again, like I say, I think in the past, the old school way, apologize if we do something wrong and shake hands, but I'm done, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Is there anybody else that wishes to comment with respect to the report and how we want to move forward from this? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Calver.
Through your worship. Yeah, I've known Councillor Shank for 39 years. Says what he thinks by times, and I don't think that there was any ill will directed to his comments. However, we do have to look at this report. It's a great report they put together, and we need to make a decision there. But I personally, I don't see where there was any ill harm intended.
Great. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Calver. Is there any other comments? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Councillor. Martin.
Sorry, I know I've said too much, but can I say one more thing?
You never say too much. Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
I also don't believe that the staff member was sleeping. Okay, I believe what I seen that night was he was looking down at his phone. So whatever Councillor Shank seen across the room, I realize that has nothing to do with the fact he made that statement, but I just want to make it perfectly clear that I believe the staff member was not sleeping.
Thanks, Councillor Martin.
Thank you.
I think Councillor Norrie, go ahead.
Yes, it is unfortunate. Yes, we have all this laws. I mean, like a lot of us started back in the 70s when you worked for the public, you had thick skin and you worked it out by sitting in a back room, shaking hands, apologizing, whatever, if you've done something wrong. But respect works two ways. And why it didn't happen where this senior manager didn't even go to you and say, can we talk with Mike about this and settle it? I don't know what this is costing the taxpayer. And the senior manager should know that. We're wasting taxpayers' money. So my respect to that senior manager is gone, to be blunt. I'm not going to say any more because I'll probably get a complaint, but I've had it with this behavior. They could have sorted it in the back room. We're wasting taxpayers' money, time, and that's all I'm going to say. I will not be in favor of any disciplinary action against Mr. Shanks.
Thanks, Councillor Norrie. Is there any other comments with respect to the report or where we're going to go forward on this? Seeing none, we do need to put some type of a resolution together or a motion together. Would entertain if somebody wants to put a motion on the floor and we'll see where it goes. Councillor Hicks, you are.
Through your worship, I'd like to make a statement. It has always been the policy in my previous places of employment that when you are in attendance in a meeting, your phone is down and you are participating 100%. So I would like to just make this statement public that moving forward, I don't think it needs to be a bylaw or a resolution. It's simple common courtesy. Your phone is not in your hand when you are in attendance at a meeting. It's part of your job. So that's all I have to say on the subject. Things look different from different angles, Bill. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. I see that Councillor Norrie wants to comment again. So go ahead, Councillor Norrie.
No, I have a motion.
Go ahead.
I move
That's
no disciplinary action. Enough's been done. Media and that, no, and we just move on. No disciplinary action.
Councillor Norrie has put a motion on the floor that there is no disciplinary action required. Am I accurate there, Councillor Norrie? Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hicks seconds that motion. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns? I see Councillor Pennell is going to comment. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Mayor. Now that that motion's on the floor, I would just like to ask, what is the worst outcome of a reprimand? As from what I understand from Ms. Dean's is we can make it as simple as, Mike, you shouldn't have done that. Don't do it again. Is that right? Like is there going to be a letter in the file or in his file, or is there, if we stay away from deducting any monetary funds from him, it's just simply saying you shouldn't have done that?
I think that was probably a question that Ms. Dean, but that's kind of why I asked what a reprimand would look like with respect to it. And that would be my understanding of it is that a reprimand is basically, we've acknowledged the fact that it shouldn't have happened and we would expect that it doesn't happen again. But that would be my interpretation of what Ms. Dean would say. And if Madam Clerk has any further that she wants to add to it, I'll give you the opportunity, but you're not bound to answer any further, Madam Clerk.
Through your worship, that is correct. The reprimand is basically just council saying that we agree that this shouldn't have happened. There is the wording that councils use vary based on the circumstances, but that is what it is at the heart.
Are you good, Councilor Purnell? Great. Is there any other comments, questions, or concerns before we call the vote? Seeing none, I'm just going to speak briefly is that this is an extremely, extremely unfortunate circumstance. Not only does it hurt our employees, it hurts our member of councils, and it hurts our community. It puts a black eye on our community, which I don't believe we need to do that, but we are going to move forward from that. And I think we have to move forward from that because we cannot continue to go down the path that we're going down. So I'm hoping that we've reached where we needed to reach. We're going to move forward. We're going to be successful, and we're going to have a community that everybody is proud of. So saying that, I'm hoping today is day one of a very, very forward, special movement that we can be proud of this community, this corporation, and this council. So in any event, I've said enough. Is there anything that came out of my statements that somebody would like to speak to? Seeing none, we'll call the vote with respect to the motion that's on the floor. All in favor of the motion that's on the floor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. If we can get Councillor Shank to come back in, we'll move forward. Thanks. Thanks, Councillor Hicks. Next on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes. We'll look for a motion to adopt the minutes of the regular session of council for July 11th, 2023. Moved by Councillor Purnell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns with respect to the adoption of the minutes, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Correspondence for information. I know we've received a bunch of correspondences for information, and I know that council has an opportunity to read and review those. Is there anything that any member of council would like to pull out and speak separately from the correspondence that we have? If not, we will note and receive the correspondence for information all under one motion. Councillor Hicks. There's nothing special. You just want to move to note and receive. Moved by Councillor Hicks, seconded by Councillor Purnell. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Unfinished business. Madam Clerk, I don't believe we have any items of unfinished business, do we? Is there any members of council has anything that's unfinished? I don't believe so. Is it unfinished business or?
Because it was brought up beforehand at North Fred, the pickleball.
Okay, and we can deal with that now, or I know that in one of the staff reports, it mentions about the courts down in North Red, because I looked at, maybe we'll address it then.
All right, thanks.
Great, thanks, Councillor Shank. Committee reports. Do we have somebody here to speak to the committee report with respect to the Waste Diversion Committee minutes? I believe Councillor Martin is on that. Is there anything you'd like to add that's not in the report?
The report pretty much speaks for itself. We're formalizing internal surveys, and next meeting, we're going to be focusing down on trying to come up with about 3 or 4 actual suggestions for council to look at in the fall. Our next meeting will be addressing that, and we should have some recommendations ready by the fall.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Martin. I appreciate that. If there's nothing else, we'll look for a motion to note and receive the Waste Diversion Committee report for June 29th, 2023, moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Hicks. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Activity reports, 11.1, activity report from Legislative Services, July of 2023. I believe, Madam Clerk, that would be yours.
Yes, through your worship, just a couple notes to add to this report. Since the report was published, we do have some of those grass cutting files have been resolved. 2 of them the orders have expired, and they're scheduled to be addressed later this week. I would also note that my report references a resolution tracker that was intended to be on this agenda. It is not, but it will be on there for the August 29th agenda and moving forward, just as a way for all of us to keep on top of what motions have been passed during this council's current year. And as well, it's not under this activity report, but later down with the E11 report, there is some notes just looking a little more in depth as to the status of some of our closures on our E11 tickets this past month. That information, depending on what direction council may give later tonight, that can either go into the activity reports or be incorporated in E11, but it is our intention to keep reporting on that information as to how tickets are closed if it's not through enforcement action being taken or through voluntary compliance.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Is there any questions with respect to the report that Madam Clerk just related to us? Seeing none. Activity report, infrastructure services, July of 2023. And I think that would be Mr. Defoe. Go ahead, Pete.
Through your worship, I'm available for any questions. I will draw to the attention of council the raw water reservoir project that has been completed, substantially completed, and it's filled now. So it's back in service. Just some final cleanup and some landscaping to do.
Thanks, Pete. Is there any questions? We have Councillor Hicks, then we have Councillor Pennell. Go ahead.
I have a feeling our question is the same, Your Honor, through you. Peter, the navigational buoy that's been damaged in the Napanee River, what caused the damage?
Through your worship, it appears that it was direct contact with the boat, and so it's been replaced.
So it's been replaced now with a permanent one, or is just the temporary?
Through your worship, so there's a temporary one that serves the same primary function. We do have on order some replacement ones, so the next time something like this does happen, we'll have a permanent spare available to put on right away.
Okay, thanks. What's the cost of a buoy? I'm just curious now.
Through your worship, I don't recall the exact cost, but this is all done within the approved budget, so there'd be no over expenditures.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hicks. Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, worship. Through you, Peter, I'm just wondering with the permits that have been acquired for Harrington Lane Bridge replacement, if somebody could reach out or hasn't already reached out to the neighbors and especially the farmer to let them know a time frame of when this is happening. Just, I know that's blocked off, but just in case they're still using it somewhat, if they could be given a heads up that that work is going to be started there.
Through your worship, we've been in direct contact with the property owners out there, so they're well aware.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pennell. Are there any other questions of Mr. Dayful? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Cower.
Through your worship. Did we get any report as to who hit the buoy or? Because I would think that would cause some substantial damage to your boat.
Through your worship, we're not aware of who caused the damage to the buoy.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Is there any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to the activity report of Community and Corporate Services for July of 2023. Do we have Mr. Pinson? I see you're moving forward.
I'll speak briefly, Your Worship. The reports there in front of you, just a couple of interesting things based on past conversations. There is a note about the website renewal, working on that and looking at sometime, I think in October, bringing that forward. And we discussed earlier today, the Via Rail train station. We've got the interior of that train station now fixed and cameras and intrusion alarms installed.
Thank you, Mr. Pinson. And I believe Councillor Shank, this would be an opportunity on facilities where it talks about the North Red Sport project. And it looks like they're waiting for a contractor to arrive to finish it. I don't know if Mr. Pinson can expand any further on that, but I see that in the report. So
the pavement's been down for a while, the post's been up, so I've had quite a few seniors and some kids with the summer off that they'd love to get on that and get to do the pickleball. Way to go.
thanks, Councillor Shank. And just by reading the report, it looks like it was supposed to have been, the last update was a couple of weeks in July, but obviously, yeah. But now they've experienced delays. So, and I don't know if Mr. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
Through your worship.
Oh,
So I spoke with Chris on this a couple weeks ago when we did operating. So I know we got paved last year by our staff and everything was set up. With the budget being delayed this year, he couldn't basically get in line with the contractor's schedule. So we tendered it last year, I believe. But because we were delayed in finalizing the budget, he wasn't sure if he would actually be able to go forward with that project until we had our budget in place. So he basically we got pushed down the line in terms of that guy's schedule for contracting this year. So I think we've kind of been pushed back a little bit further than we originally expected is what's gone on. So it is in line to happen as the report mentions, but I think that's kind of the circumstance as to why we're a little bit more delayed than we expected originally.
It's the report that I just wanted to hear.
yeah, thanks. And thanks, Nathan, for expanding on that. So if there's nothing further with respect to that, oh, sorry, I've got Councillor Hicks and I have Councillor Pennell. So go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
John, through you, Mr. Mayor, this will be the last opportunity to ask this question of you personally. Where do we stand? Have you heard anything on the camera grant? The funding?
Handy dandy Nathan has all the answers here.
So sorry, through your worship, I reached out to the ministry yesterday actually on this because I'd heard rumblings that we had gotten word back, but they aren't giving us word until mid to late August. So there hasn't been any decision made, but that's the timeline they've given us at this point. So still up in limbo, unfortunately.
Thanks, Councillor Hicks. Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, I have two questions on this report. One is the window clings for the office at Strathcona Paper Center. It's on the report. I didn't know what it was, so I'd like to ask about it, find out what is going to be wrote on those window clings.
Through your worship, I believe this is where they reached out to some of the main user groups at the facility and asked if they could get some pictures of their organizations to put up on the windows. So that full glassed-in area, I believe the intent is to have some images from each of those user groups. So I think there's 4 they reached out to. I don't know if they've deviated from that at all, but that was the original intent.
Okay, thank you. And is that, this is probably going to open up a can of worms, but is that, are all the windows going to be done? So therefore no staff could be in that office?
I don't believe the whole, I don't know the extent of it. I think there's 4, this is just going off memory of being in the facility. I think there's 4 full panes and they've kind of extended the area of the glass from what it used to be. So I believe it wouldn't actually cover more because we used to have kind of like a frosted glass on the lower portion as it wrapped fully around until you got to the counter area. So I think there's 4 panes that would technically be covered. And then you would still have 2 full panes out front, plus the glassed in area that they've added now that's accessible, that would still be visual. You could visually see staff if they were in there.
Okay, thank you. And just one more, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
On the second page of the report, created and mapped the rural road routes. Yeah, it goes on. Where can I and where can the residents of Napanee find these maps?
Through your,
I think, go ahead, Mr.
looks like the clerk was going to interrupt me. What, do you know?
I think
Me?
Madam Clerk has the answer, so.
Sorry, through your worship, those are intended to be incorporated in the website update that is happening in the fall. I only know this because our Heritage Committee is also working on one of those maps, and that map is also scheduled to be part of that update, which is, yeah, intended to be incorporated in the overall website overhaul.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, and thank you, Councillor Pennell. Is there anything further? Seeing none, we'll move on to activity report, Fire Department, July of 2023. And I believe the chief is here. Go ahead, chief.
Through your worship, I can answer any questions you have on this report as you see it in front of you. I will draw your attention to an update, the M&R forest fire that we went up and helped out on several days with our crews. Excuse me. We've just received word that the M&R has paid the bill, and the host fire department has asked us for an invoice. So we're able to recoup the funds that we put out in kind to go help our neighbors.
Thank you, chief. Always great news. So thank you very much. Is there any questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
I think this was a excellent helping another area with a staff and in a stressed time, and the chief going ahead and the training that those individuals got was immense in that type of a fire scenario. And it's a good news story, especially when we go ahead and get recouped back from M&R. And I just like to say kudos to the chief and the staff that went up and had the time and the training that they got, which would be, if we ever had a bad fire here again, it would be, you'd definitely be paid back multi-fold.
Thanks, Councillor Shank. I think you bring up a good point, is that we need the help of our neighbors, and we need to help our neighbors whenever possible, because none of us, and I've said this a million times, none of us can do it on our own, right? So we do need to have those relationships. So thank you very much. Is there any other questions or comments for the chief? Seeing none, thanks, Chief Hammond. Next up is the activity report, growth and expansion. I believe that would be Mr. Nobes. Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you, Your Worship. Available for any questions. I will just do a very brief overview for council. We are on track to either meet or exceed budget as far as revenues for building. We've issued 33 new dwelling permits in addition to the long-term care facility on Dryden Road at County Road 41. We are nearing completion of the site plan review, site plan control review for the wastewater treatment facility on the north side of Goodyear Road. That will be forthcoming in the very near future. That will see the construction of a new road within a municipal unopened municipal road allowance, where it would provide for new development opportunities on either side of that, and provide direct access for this wastewater treatment facility. This land was under consideration previously under two terms of council ago, and this is the follow-up to those prior approvals that were given. Staff will also be coming forward to council with a community improvement plan bylaw for industrial development. This will aid us in attracting new larger scale industrial development. So that will be forthcoming at the end of August. Following that bylaw, there would be a requirement to draft and implement a community improvement plan. So there will be significant public input and feedback solicited through that process. And finally, the formerly known as Limestone Ridge subdivision now has been renamed to the Springside Meadows subdivision. That is, we're anticipating in the near future a final plan of subdivision application, which will be accompanied by many technical reports, studies, and drawings for staff's review and ultimately council decision. And the developer has indicated to staff that they're looking to begin servicing in 2024 and construction of homes in 2025. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Mike. Is there any questions for Michael with respect to his activity report for growth and expansion 2023 July? Seeing none, thank you very much, Michael. And it's all good news, and I expect we'll see some good things to come to our community in the not too distant future. So thank you. Activity report, financial services, July 2023, and I believe Ms. Davidson, that would be you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to bring your attention. So on July the 13th, we had a tax sale for 3 properties on Hillside Ave. There were no offers received, so those were unsuccessful tax sale properties. In terms of the last month, we have reduced our second and third year tax arrears by 4 additional rolls. So actively collecting and working on that downward trend of arrears. Upcoming in the third and fourth quarter of this year, we have 5 additional tax sales that are currently listed. So we have 2 that are coming up mid-September and 3 that will be in early November.
Great, thanks, Nicole. Is there any questions or comments for Ms. Davidson with respect to her report, written or verbal? Seeing none, thanks, Nicole. We'll look for a motion that council receive for information the activity reports for July 2023 items 11.1 through 11.7 to note and receive those activity reports. Moved by, Councilor Pennell, go ahead.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, we didn't do 11.7.
I am sorry, you're absolutely right. We missed the 11.7 access E11, and we wouldn't want to miss that because I believe that would be Madam Clerk's report. Am I correct there?
Through your worship, this report is a joint effort. It collates all of the statistics that have been generated in our system. As was reported the last time we brought this forward, the system works on either year to date or previous months. So as we get more time with it, we will be able to provide you that month over month reporting. At this point, we have about 6 weeks of data in there that is being reflected. Some of this is going to be a repeat from the last time when you had the first 3 weeks of June in there. We did sort of highlight the information we believe will be useful to council to pull out for that greater analysis, such as for bylaw. There's a couple, one bylaw and one sort of organization corporate policy need that have been flagged that may require further discussion in the future around naturalized lawns and trees. If there's any other questions, let us know.
Thanks, Madam Clerk. Go ahead, Councilor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Madam Clerk. More and more, I'm starting to look at this. I'm starting to understand the reports, and but maybe it's something that I can just give to you over an email sometime, just when we get to the categories here. Cumulative data tables. There's just some categories in here that are too vague for myself. Like for instance, under bylaw, the category is other, and there were 16 total cases. So if we could maybe break that up a little bit. Not really looking for an answer tonight, but just more of a statement. And then also under Parks and Recreations, there's no other, and under Public Works, there's snow removal this time of year. So I was just wondering what that would be. But these are all just something that this is new, we can work through. But just wanted to let you know that myself as being one of the people that are resisting this, it's starting to look a little familiar to me, so it's starting to come about. So thank you.
Through your worship, I appreciate that feedback, and certainly if there is more clarity we can provide to these categories, we are happy to do that. I do agree 16 is a lot to have in an other category. And we can do some work to refine that as we see what categories people are frequently using. We started this populating what the options were under the old report and issue, and we can continue to add categories as we see need for them. And as always, please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or concerns ahead of council meetings too.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pennell. Go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Madam Clerk. I'm looking at page, I believe it's page 4, so where it shows the map. And I'm just wondering if you can explain just very quickly the numbers and the colors that I'm seeing there. So are these grouped together? Is that what I understand, into the different categories? And then you're showing where most of these are coming from?
Through your worship, no, the colors are just based on volume concentration. So it's, if you want to think of like the closest example that I'm easily familiar with is like a real estate listing map. If there's the balloon that says there's 50 listings here, and then as you zoom in closer and closer, the number drops until you can zoom right in on the address where the complaint came from. We don't quite want to go into that level of detail on this report here, but this sort of shows broadly where the geographically where the complaints, or not all complaints, service requests are coming from, and centered around population areas as would be expected.
And just one quick follow-up. When I see yellow, orange, and green, is this high, low, medium? Is that what that's reflecting?
Through your worship, no, it's just about the volume. So green appears to be under 10 and yellow under 100.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hicks. Is there any other questions for Madam Clerk? Seeing none, I'm going to agree with Councillor Pennell. The more I see it, the more I start to like it, because there's a substantial amount of detail in these reports. And the reality of it is, it really is very easy to read and very easy to pick out the hot spots when you look at the report. So it's really starting to grow on me as well. So if there's nothing further, seeing none, we'll look for a motion to note and receive the activity reports 11.1 through to 11.7 with respect to the July 2023 information of the activities. So moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Norrie. No further comments, questions, or concerns. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Staff reports. CEO staff report 2023 business plan mid-year update. And I believe Mr. Pinson, you would be up.
Thank you, Your Worship. Straightforward report for council. Again, we started strategic plan. We started with what we're going to do this year, and this is really giving you a mid-year update as to where we are. As you read the report, there's a great deal of reference to what we're doing around customer service at 99 Advance, which would be normal with everybody moving into one building. Still a lot of work with folks updating policies and procedures to make sure that we are current in our policy suite. A lot of effort around the issues of asset management, both in terms of mapping assets and doing some of the technology work for a compliance date of July, I believe, of 2025. So you'll see that more often. And before Councillor Pennell corners me on the finance section, I did send out the missing piece. I apologize. I assumed that was going to be updated from the last report. I would like council to note that the stats in the initial report are from January of 2023, which would have captured 2022. And all of the numbers that finance captures is presented each month in their activity reports. So those numbers are there from a public viewpoint perspective, but I will make sure that the document per se that sits in Teams and is available online is updated accordingly. Happy to take questions if there are any.
Thanks, Mr. Pinson. Is there any question? See, Councillor Hicks, go ahead.
Through you, Your Worship. Mr. Pinson, we spoke earlier about asset management, and that is on here as a bullet point. And I'm wondering where are we on that? And you had also mentioned that we would not be candidates for funding without having that in place by 2024. So what provincial, I'm assuming you were referring to provincial funding.
Sure, through Your Worship to Councillor Hicks. So I think the immediate term, we did have a report from PSD, Public Sector Digest, which basically said we were compliant to July of 2024. So the immediate term we're okay. I'm more concerned with the longer term into 2025 in terms of making sure all of our assets are mapped. And we've got some work to do further on not only the digitization, but the IT work around not just the work orders around roads and stuff, but buildings, vehicles and all that stuff. So it should be a big focus for 2024 to make sure that staff is engaged around what that work looks like, especially in finance and in infrastructure.
Thanks, Councillor Hicks. Is there any, go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, I have a question or a comment and then a question. Thank you, Mr. Pinson, for sending that along because it is on my notes here and I received that from this afternoon. I really appreciate that information. I have a question for Madam Clerk. Of this report on page 20, under results at mid-year, second paragraph down, it states results. Our public consultation page published for parking bylaw, semicolon, waiting on feedback from Market Square Committee and signage data. That's the committee that I'm the chair of, and what are you waiting for?
Through your worship, when this was initially discussed, that one of the items to be addressed in our parking bylaw is that the John Street stalls are designated in our bylaw as staff only. That's obviously not relevant now that this is not a staff only building. And at the time, you had requested that the committee be allowed to provide some suggestions as to what we should do instead with that space, or if there was anything else that needed to be considered there. So I apologize if I dropped the ball on communicating that back to you. And we are also working with with other staff departments just to do that signage inventory to make sure that what we have listed in our bylaw appendices matches the signs that are on the road. If there's any other areas that need to be corrected.
Thank you. It all makes sense now. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pennell. Is there any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Calver.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just page 12 says a review and response agreements to the tiered response agreement with the county. Says results at mid-year was all response agreements have been reviewed and tiered response agreements with the county has been stalled as they do not want to discuss cost recovery method. I just wondered how the meeting went back in March when they had the CAOs and the fire chiefs all there. It's my understanding that their county is waiting to hear back from the town. They haven't heard anything as of yet.
I'll start, Chief. So through your worship to the Deputy Mayor, we did have a meeting. I know, and the chief will correct me if I'm wrong, we had some basic terminology issues that needed to be fleshed out in terms of what the agreement was. I think though fundamentally we are looking at the call volumes. They understand what the call volumes are as much as we do. Our call volumes are significantly higher than any other municipality in Lennox and in LA County. So what we're proposing is that there is some form of a reimbursement process, because basically what the chief and his fire department is doing is every time they go out the door, there's disposable items and gas and a bunch of stuff that other fire departments are not spending. There has not been a great deal of desire, I think, from the county to enter into any kind of reimbursement transactions. If you have anything to add, feel free.
Absolutely, through your worship. Prior to that meeting, what spawned that meeting was we have the ability. I'll back up. When an ambulance is called from South Frontenac into LNA County or from Hastings County to backfill a Napanee ambulance, there's a cross-border contingency contract. So those ambulance bases are paid per diem for ambulance. That's what we initially started back in October, asking the county to do for us, because we clearly are being used to backfill when ambulances are on offload times. So that's where it stalled. We spend probably $70,000 a year running medical calls that we probably shouldn't be even going to outside of our tiered response agreement. The CAO is correct, and you are also correct, Deputy. We haven't got back to the table with a tiered response agreement because they basically told us flat out, that we're not paying you. It'll never happen. So our agreement sits as an agreement, just not signed. We're following the same protocols that we followed last year this time.
Thanks, Chief. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Calver.
No, thank you. That's all I want to know.
Great, thanks. Is there any other questions or comments with respect to the staff report? I see in the recommendation that if there are any additional high-level priorities foreseen by council, that they be communicated to staff. Are there any of these that we can communicate to staff before we note and receive the report? Seeing none, we'll look for a motion to note and receive the CAO staff report 2023 business plan mid-year update. Moved by Councillor Pinal, seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed, motion's carried. Procedural bylaw review, and I believe, is that you, Madam Clerk?
So through your worship, the primary goal of this procedure bylaw review is to follow up on the trial run we've been doing for the last few months with moving our closed session meetings to start at 5 p.m., getting us out of here more reliably at 10 p.m. instead of much later than that. I believe the consensus is that that has been successful and is something we want to formalize. Also, we decided to take advantage of this opportunity to reconsider some of the potential other changes that were discussed last year. I believe for most of the things, it was generally positive reception, but the discussion was that it was just not good timing with the election coming up right away. There are a couple tweaks that have been made since this was last discussed, the biggest one taking out any changes to how we do committee of the whole and regular council sessions. And assuming that the recommendation is supported here, staff's intention would be to go to that draft bylaw from last summer as a starting template point, just because that language is quite a bit longer, but it's also a little bit clearer to understand, but making only those specific changes as outlined in the report attached. And the other options obviously are outlined in your report. We certainly don't have to approve this tonight. We can keep having a longer discussion.
Are there any questions or comments with respect to the report and the statements that Madam Clerk has just said? Seeing none, and I think we'll take advantage of one of the oh, sorry, go ahead, Councilor Purnell.
No, Mr. Mayor, I was just gonna make a motion, that's all.
Go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that council receive for information that legislative service procedure bylaw review report, and further the council direct staff to draft an update to the town's procedure bylaw, which includes the proposed changes as outlined in this report.
Great. We have a motion on the floor from Councillor Purnell. Would somebody like to second that motion? Councillor Shank. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns with respect to the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of that motion? Opposed, motion's carried. And Madam Clerk, we're going to take advantage of one of your recommendations there and take a 10-minute break in the very near future. Bylaw enforcement policy standards, and I think that would be Madam Clerk as well.
So through your worship, this was initially presented at the end of June. It was deferred to allow time for more comments. There were a couple minor changes made as a result of those comments. Those are highlighted in the report, but just more clarity that any changes to enforcement priorities would need to be made by council. That is not something that staff would undertake to do themselves. And I would just like to reiterate that every policy is a policy of council and can be changed at any time by council if we find that something's not working. The minimum review proposed for this is every year. But if you would like to see, because this is potentially a bigger change, if you'd like to see a sooner review period, we can accommodate that as well.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there any questions or comments from Madam Clerk with respect to her presentation and report? Seeing none, we have a recommendation the council receive for information the legislative services bylaw enforcement standards policy report and infer that council approve the changes to bylaw enforcement policy PO 2001-01 as presented in the revised bylaw enforcement policy LS 2023-01. Is there someone who would like to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Hicks, seconded by Councillor Shank. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns? Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I just wanted to say that I appreciate how well this was wrote and that the changes, the considerations were made. And again, it was just a very well wrote document, and I'm glad that we took the time to slow down a little bit and review it. Although the changes were minor, sometimes a minor change is huge, and I feel better approving this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pennell. I know you put a lot of time and effort into it, so thank you. Is there any further comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All in favor of the motion that's on the floor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Customer Service and Complaints Management Policy Suite. And Madam Clerk, I think you may be up again.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, there were a couple tweaks that we made following the discussion at the last meeting in June. One piece of feedback that was received that isn't incorporated yet, just because I didn't want to speak on behalf of the other members of senior leadership, was a request that the reporting on general analysis and trends be done more frequently than quarterly. I will say that we started with quarterly because that was what was seen in the base templates in other municipalities. I believe it could be done monthly as part of the activity reports, but again, I didn't want to preemptively make that change on behalf of other members of staff. If that is something that council would like to see changed, I believe we could add that language in the motion.
Thanks, Jessica. Is there any comments, questions, or concerns with respect to Jessica's report and her verbal report as well? Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, yes, Madam Clerk, I believe that it's very important for myself and hopefully the rest of council to receive these reports on a monthly basis other than a quarterly. There's a lot of changes coming up here, so if I could get that information on the monthly, I think that would be best for all of us.
Thanks, Councillor Pennell. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none. We don't have a motion on the floor yet, do we, Madam Clerk? Or do we?
Through your worship, no, you do not. I would suggest that if it is council's direction that the reporting, any reporting requirements in the policies be updated from quarterly to monthly, that just be included in any motion that's passed.
Great. Thank you, Madam Clerk. We have a recommendation the council receive for information the Customer Service and Complaints Management Policy Suite report, and further the council adopt the following policies as presented: revised corporate complaints policy, customer service standards policy, respectful conduct policy. And was there something we're going to add to that recommendation, Madam Clerk? Or are we good?
Through your worship, if it's the will of council, the only suggestion that I heard discussed was that any references to quarterly reporting be updated to be monthly.
And Councillor Pennell, would you like to make that motion then? And are you good with that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make that motion with that added amendment that the reports are monthly.
Great. We have a motion on the floor from Councillor Pennell. Deputy Mayor Calver has seconded that motion. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns? Go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Through you, Your Worship, this is to Madam Clerk and also Ms. Fisher. Could I request that the customer service standards policy is included in the new employee package that's handed out, so that there is no ambiguity in what's expected of that employee when they're hired on as a town employee, and how they are to deal with the public, answer the phone, take messages and communicate just in general? Is this something that is possible? Can it be considered?
Holly, would you like to address that? Or Madam Clerk? I guess I think looks like Holly's coming up to microphone. Go ahead, Holly.
Through your worship, to Councillor Hicks, the next group of, I think you're referring to the compensation bylaw, am I correct?
No,
So just general policies?
just general policies, but from where I sit, this is a very important piece of information that every employee, everybody that's currently employed by the town should be reviewing this, and any new employees, it should be part of the package provided to them at their hire date.
Yes, our goal and purpose going forward is that with the creation of a new policy handbook for staff, that it would be included the customer service standards as well as their expectations, and it would be provided to all new staff.
Perfect. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thanks, Councillor Hicks. I don't think we need to, we don't need to adjust the motion on that, do we, Madam Clerk? We're good with that. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, seeing none, all in favor of that motion? Opposed, motion's carried. The Circuit Rider Drive extension, we've already done a motion to defer that to a date very soon. And I think at this point, prior to going any further, we still got a lot of work to do tonight. I think we'll take a 10-minute break. So having said that, we'll see you at approximately 9 o'clock. Thanks, folks. We'll be back shortly. Perfect. Welcome back, everybody. And bear with us. We've still got a long agenda to go yet. Up next is infrastructure services, utilities, water pollution control plant, upgrade project, maintenance, garage building tender award. And I think Mr. Defoe is up. Go ahead, Pete.
Through your worship, the staff report you have in front of you this evening is basically part 2 of 2 with respect to the maintenance building. So back in February 2023, council approved the award of the actual steel structure, the building shell. And so that building itself is actually scheduled to be on site next week. The staff report that you have in front of you this evening is actually for the general contractor to do the actual erection of the building, as well as all the civil works and surrounding works in that area. The tender itself, the results when they came in. So I'll draw attention to a couple points. So one being market value. The engineer estimate was very close. So there was a Class A estimate provided that's plus or minus within 5%. They were within the 3-ish mark. So as far as market value, we're confident that the values that the tenders were submitted were within market value. As far as cost competitiveness, there were 3 total tenders. Low bid and second bid were very close. That's always a good indicator that it was a very competitive bid and fair value. The project itself has a substantial completion date of May 31st of next year of 2024. So that would become just on the heels of hopefully another tender coming out for the actual construction of the wastewater plant itself. So this is kind of just the phase 1 that was able to provide us the option for this quick disposal of 45 Commercial Court. So we relocate staff down, office space, workshop, garage, etc. I'm available for any questions.
Thanks, Pete. Is there any questions for Mr. Defoe with respect to the report or the verbal presentation that he's done? Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Through Mr. Defoe, this must be quite the garage to have installed and put together for $5.2 million. Is there offices inside? Is there what else is in there that you can help me out with other than preparing the site, putting down some footings and erecting the building for $5.2 million?
So through your worship, just to put it the project into a magnitude of scale. So it's around the 10,000 square foot mark. So it's big. It's a very large structure. So if you're looking for square footage, so it's up getting close. We're going to be close to the $600 per square foot build cost for that. So to put it in perspective, just a residential build, you're going to be $300 to $400 per square foot for a build. There's a lot of structural work that's inside the building to support what its use is. For example, the concrete floor is a foot thick in the building to provide the needed support for what's inside. There's office space, lunchroom, workshop areas, and then the garage storage for vehicles and equipment itself. The cost itself, if you're trying to do a direct comparison to whether a building is some similar type nature, there's allowances in there for things that likely won't proceed right away. They'll probably be carried in. They may be carried into more of the next phase. So, for example, an on-site generator. So that'd be something that we may look at cutting out of it to trim a bit of the cost down. So.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pennell. Thanks, Mr. Defoe. Is there any other questions or comments with respect to that? Go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, Your Honor. When you say prefab building, is that like a Butler building?
Through your worship, correct.
So is it 2 stories, 1 story?
Through your worship, so it's tall. There's very, very high ceilings in it to get the equipment inside, but it's not multi-story.
So there's not a mezzanine or anything like that?
Through your worship, so the office space is all down on the main level. Yep.
Thanks, Councillor Hicks. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a recommendation that council receive for information the infrastructure services utilities WPCP upgrade project maintenance building tender award report, and further that council authorize staff to award tender IS 2023-01 maintenance garage to Wimp and Smith Construction Limited for the sum of $5,200,000 excluding HST. Sorry. We have someone to move that motion, moved by Counselor Nori, seconded by Counselor Martin. If there's any further comments, questions, or concerns, go ahead, Counselor Brunel.
Thank you. Through your worship, I was just waiting for the motion to be on the floor. Under the financial implications, I note that there's a note here saying that $623,000 was included in the installation of the building when we purchased that from Belcon. So the number that we're really coming up with at the end of the day for this building is how much?
Through your worship, so the original resolution from back in February included supply and install. So what we did is we pulled the installation component out of it because the supplier of the building wanted to bid as a general as well. So the town paid 800 and change to buy the building and then get it delivered on site. So the installation component, the 600 and whatever that it was for $1,000, that number there was embedded into the contract. So whoever the general was that was low bid carries that installation cost. So the supplier actually does the installation of the steel, but that cost was carried in that. So overall total project cost, it's getting close to 6 million, and we're going to try to trim some of that down.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying.
Thanks, Councilor Pennell. Is there any other further comments or questions? Seeing nothing, we have a motion on the floor. We'll call for the vote. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Next up is growth and expansion PLC 2023-31, 229-231 Mill Street West application to lift part lot control. And I see Mr. Nobes has come up. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Worship. I believe this is the first part lot control lifting application that this term of council has seen, but effectively what this application does is more or less allow a severance on a parcel of land that's contained within a subdivision. So in this case, there's a semi-detached dwelling located on a property, and the intention is to split that down the middle to convey each side of the semi-detached separately to separate property owners. So what this implementing bylaw will do is lift part lot control under Section 50 of the Planning Act to allow for the transfer of each side independently, and then part lot control comes back down after a set period of time noted in the bylaw. So effectively what it is a severance, but we're able to utilize this more efficient manner for lands contained within a subdivision. So a number of these had been approved previously under previous terms of council, particularly for semi-detached and townhouse style dwellings. So I believe this is the first for this term of council, but if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thanks, Michael. Is there any questions for Michael? Seeing none, we have a recommendation that council receive for information the growth and expansion PLC 2023-031, 229-231 Mill Street West application to lift part lot control report, and further that the council approve the application and implementing bylaw. Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Councillor Pennell. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Growth and expansion PLSUBF 2022-012 Richmond Park Homes Phase 1 pre-servicing, and I believe Michael's up again. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. So similar to at the last meeting with the Millhouse Yards Phase 2 pre-servicing agreement approval, this is the same request of these developers for the lands located to the north of Canvers Way. So in my report, I touch on the history of the site. There were previous planning approvals, official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, draft plan of subdivision approval approved by the previous term of council. We've worked with the developer and their engineering team to land on a final engineering design for these subdivision lands. There's parkland to be dedicated at the time of final plan of subdivision approval. So not at this point, it won't be conveyed, but through the final subdivision approval process, it will. The developer has proposed some road naming, which that will be provided to the Heritage Committee for input. No road naming is proposed at this time. That will be at the time of final plan of subdivision approval. And there is a proposed multi-use pathway on the south side of the future east-west collector road at the north end of the development. So that has come about through the municipal class EA that we're working on jointly with the county. So that would link up to future road running north-south to connect Jim Kimmett and Cherrywood Parkway. There would be a multi-use path on that road as well as this east-west road. The developer has proposed some elements of cost sharing. I have commented on those 3 points that the developer has requested. I can go into detail on those if you wish, but it is all contained within the report. The pre-servicing agreement does not bind the municipality to any form of cost sharing, and the developer has agreed to the conditions contained within the pre-servicing agreement. Effectively, what the staff comments state are that the areas where the developer is looking for some cost sharing of the municipality, our local services policy and our development charges background study addresses all of these points, and they're ultimately determined to be developer responsibility. So there's no cost sharing of the municipality at this point in time. However, the developer can certainly approach abutting landowners on either side to work through those details independently of the municipality. And I believe that's primarily it. At this point in time, we would be taking site securities for the works to be completed, at which point in time they would be returned when final subdivision approval is granted, and we work through those outstanding works to be completed. We would be taking securities for any works that aren't yet completed and aren't yet assumed by the municipality. So the agreement's very much safeguarding our interests, and this just allows the developer to begin servicing the land, getting the land prepped for future development of homes. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thanks, Michael. Is there any questions for Michael with respect to his written or verbal report this evening? Go ahead, Councilor Brunel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Michael, just wondering about those securities. Is that just for this phase, or after this phase is done, they're returned, or do you wait till the whole project is done?
So there's through your worship. So there's 2, I guess, stages of taking securities. At this point in time, we're taking about $372,000 of securities because there are some off-site works on our own municipal lands that they're essentially they'll be digging up part of our right of way, installing services, reinstatement. There's the bulk of the cost and the services are there, as well as base security amounts for works on site. They won't be able to connect to our services until the final plan of subdivision approval is granted. So they can lay the pipe, but they can't yet connect because that final subdivision approval would be needed to make that connection. But through the pre-servicing and then following that, the final plan of subdivision approval is where we would then take additional securities for works that aren't yet complete. So top coat of asphalt and installation of sidewalks and streetlights and above ground infrastructure works. But so there would be, we take about $370,000 of security under the pre-servicing. Once the final plan is approval is granted, that 370 goes back to the developer, but then we take whatever's outstanding as additional securities. So there's money in and money out, more or less, through those 2 processes. But we always hold the amount of securities that are required to finish the job per se, if the work doesn't proceed expeditiously.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Councilor Brunel. Is there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we've got a recommendation that council receive for information, the growth and expansion PLS UPF 2022-012 Richmond Park Homes Phase 1 pre-servicing report, and further council authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute the pre-servicing agreement on behalf of the municipality. Moved by Councilor Brunel, seconded by Councilor Hicks. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Human Resources Staffing Update, and I believe Chief Hammond, that would be you.
So good evening, through your worship. I do apologize. I'm losing my voice for some reason. So as you know, Deputy Fire Chief Kevin Duncan is retiring probably within the next 4.5 to 5 weeks. He's given his date as September 22nd. This report requests that you give me and HR permission to post that position now and try and fill it while he's still sitting in the seat. Benefits of that is transferring some of the important information as well as logins and legislative authority delegation, that sort of stuff that we have to do. I'd like help with that. So that's my request through the staff report, is that there may be an overlap in pay by a couple of weeks if we're successful in finding somebody in a short amount of time. Here
Great,
for the
thanks, Chief.
questions.
Is there any questions for Chief Hammond with respect to his reporter's verbal presentation? Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
Chief, yeah, I totally agree with this. Is that going to be posted internal, external, or external?
It will be posted externally.
I'll move.
Thanks, Councillor Shank. Councillor Shank will put the motion on the floor, seconded by Councillor Norrie. Is there any further comments or questions for the chief with respect to this posting and filling of the position? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Calver.
So we have nobody internally that would be capable of stepping up? Is that why we're going externally, or?
There has been no indication in present staff for the job.
Thank you.
And of course, if somebody takes an interest, they're more than welcome to apply, I'm assuming. Am I right, Chief?
Absolutely. So when we say external, there are some internal candidates from our paid on call that will probably post and, they'll definitely apply because they have the qualifications. Unfortunately, and I will say this on my soapbox because I've listened to enough of it tonight, folks. People don't want to step into management positions in this organization right now. Okay. And I'm being just as blunt as you were tonight with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Is there any further comments or questions? Seeing none, we have a motion on the floor. I believe all in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Procurement status report Q2 2023, and I believe Ms. Davidson is up next. Go ahead, Nicole.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So what this report is it's essentially a summary of our procurements that we've done through our delegated procurement authority based on our bylaw. So attached to this report are some authority memos. So the first three that I'm just briefly going to talk to, they do not require any additional council approval, as this has already been approved within budget. And this is just for council awareness and transparency. So we undertook 2 cooperative purchasing options with the county of Lennox and Addington, one for asphalt patching and one for traffic control markings, as well as an RFT for less than $50,000 to award for concrete sidewalk repairs. In addition to that, there's also a memo regarding a single source procurement. So this was not brought to council for approval before the contract commenced. There were invoices paid on this contract without a memo being brought to finance or to council. Also, we have included authority memos for emergency procurements under $25,000. So based on these, they're going to be absorbed within operational budgets. And these don't necessarily represent an emergency as we think about it, but it's an unforeseen repair or maintenance that we've had to undergo because we just cannot leave it in the state that it is in. So one was for 13 Market Square HVAC replacement. One was for a furnace replacement at the library, as well as 2 invoices for land surveying from 2021 that were unpaid. Staff in the departments were unaware that these were outstanding, and the individual who reached out with the surveying company is no longer with the town. So when the departments came to finance and asked how we should deal with these, my recommendation was to include them as an emergency procurement and absorb them in the current budgets as we had those commitments to vendors.
Thanks, Nicole. Is there any questions or comments with respect to Nicole's report, both written or verbal? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Calver.
So when you're talking about a furnace replacement at the library, that's the county library across the river there, or which library are we referring to?
I believe that's that library.
It's
Yes.
actually owned by us, but it's, yeah, the county, we lease it to the county, or I'm not sure what the agreement is, but it's actually our building that we own. So, and I think,
Okay.
is there anybody else who can? That, okay. Councilor Brunel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Nicole, what report is it that I'm looking here that was not brought to council?
It was the single source less than $100,000 for bulk liquid calcium chloride.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other questions? Seeing none, this is a very thorough report, and I would hope that in the future we see these again. As most of us know, we do have an audit with respect to KPMG. I'm sensing, or as I read these things, that some of these items that are in this report will probably be forwarded to KPMG. Am I accurate at that? Or will this fall within the realms of what they would be looking at?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to answer your question, yes. Any violations that are cited here have also been brought to KPMG's attention, and these will be the types of procurement documents that they will be reviewing, as well as various other documents.
Great, thank you. I am quite impressed with, when it comes to transparency, I don't think you're going to get any more transparency than this report this evening. So it pretty much identifies everything we do. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Is there any other comments or questions that have come out of my statements? Seeing none, we have a recommendation that council receive for information the procurement status report Q2 2023 report. Need somebody to make the motion. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Hicks. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns with respect to this report? Seeing none. All in favor of the report? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks, Nicole. 2023 Q2 capital results and reserve balances. I believe Ms. Davidson is up again.
Yes, that is me as well. So through you, Mr. Mayor, first I just want to note, so I did have images that were in this report, but it seems that they are not in the posted copies. So I do apologize for that. Essentially what they were is just snippets from the attached reports that was rolling up totals. So I will start with capital reports. So you can see there is the attached report for our capital spend year to date. Currently, right now, we are still on track to meet budgets. A lot of spending is happening now as we are in the heavy summer months for construction. But at this time, I do not see any major issues, and the projects seem to be tracking on point. In terms of the reserves, when we look here in the attachment, so I have 2022 ending balances, which are pre-audited. So this does not account for any surplus and or deficit that may come out of our year-end audit. In speaking with our auditors recently, they are starting to work on our file, but they are still expecting about a September timeframe to be able to work through our year-end audit. So the 2023 balance current, that is based off of what the pre-audited 2022 ending values are. And then we have a column for 2023 commitments and potential commitments, and then what that current projected balance is. So 2023 commitments is representing anything that was in the budget as a budgeted contribution to or from reserves, as well as anything that has come through council resolution up to this point to be pulled from reserve. So those are our budgeted commitments. Under potential commitments, these are additional things that have been discussed, whether at council or through management meetings, about what potentially could be coming down the pipe, which will also have to be pulled from reserves. So in my note here, under working capital, you'll see that there's $137,000 potential commitment from reserves. That is the potential commitment for the downtown cameras if that grant is awarded. as well as an ask that is coming from the SOS organization for funding. Under industrial lands, you will also see that there's a commitment and potential commitment there. That is for the servicing of the industrial park. And that is the amount that shows under the commitments. The potential commitment there would be a recommendation from finance, as we have unfunded debt for the, or unfunded spend for the industrial lands from some years ago that needs to be paid down. So that would be any proceeds of sale that are left over that do not have to be spent on servicing should go towards paying down that unfunded portion for those lands. I'm open for comment or question on this report.
Thanks, Nicole. Is there any questions or comments with respect to Nicole's written report or verbal report here? Go ahead, Councilor Shank.
Nicole, so the total town reserves, all right, the general reserves, not PUC, is $3.7 million.
Yes.
And then your projected balance at the end of what money's already been spent is 3 million.
Yes.
83. Okay. Thank you.
And just to add to that, through you, Mr. Mayor, this, nowhere in here are we accounting for the disposition of 45 Commercial Court. I have left that off this projection as that is up in the air, and there will need to be a decision made on that. But that is not representative in any of these projected balances here.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. That'll end up in some reserve at some point, and I think it was up and around $1.5 million. So, right, if I'm not mistaken. Go ahead, Councilor Shank.
Nicole, one other thing you were talking about, the industrial debt. Could you tell me what that debt is?
So that, I believe, comes from when the industrial lands were purchased some years ago. So there's about $600,000. It's not debt, it's just unfunded balances. And that will need to be paid back from the proceeds. So if, based on these ballpark numbers, roughly at the end of the year, if there are no other sales of land there, we should have about $200,000, which my recommendation would be to put that against that unfunded portion.
Thanks, Councilor Shank. Is there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thanks, Nicole. I mean, the reality of it is, I'm going to break this down for somebody very simple like myself. We've got money in the bank, do we not? And roughly how much money in the bank do we have that's accessible?
So yes, we do have reserves. My biggest caution is we need to protect those reserves. So every time we pull from them and do not put money back into them, we are putting our future in jeopardy. This money needs to protect our assets, and we need to build a plan to continue to grow those reserves to protect our assets for the future. So it's not doom and gloom, but if we do not protect those reserve balances, it can very quickly become doom and gloom. And we want to make sure that Napanee is in a position that we can keep up with potential things that are coming to this area to make Napanee great.
Great. Thank you very much, Nicole. Is there anything that come from my comments or questions? Seeing none, we have a recommendation. The council received for information the financial operating results for the period of January through to June 2023 Q2 results. Moved by Councilor Shank, seconded by Councilor Hicks. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks, Nicole. And again, I really like the transparency that's in the report. So thank you very much. I believe we got the 2023 quarterly financial operating report. Is that you as well?
Yes, it is. So through you, Mr. Mayor, this is our quarterly financial report for operating ending the end of June. So based overall, we are trending slightly below target for mid-year, which is always good news. Myself and the deputy treasurer, we haven't seen any major areas of concern. Everybody seems to be on base, and we've had department meetings to go through the results. So I won't go through line by line, but if anybody has specific items that they'd like to talk about, we're happy to go through those.
Thanks. Is there anything that anybody wants to ask Nicole while she's here? Seeing none, we have a recommendation that council receive for information the financial operating results for the period of January through to June 2023 Q2 results. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Bylaws. We have bylaw number 2023-0051 to appoint deputy treasurer. And the bylaw obviously is to authorize the appointment of Nathan Murphy as the deputy treasurer. Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Councillor Hicks. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, we'll read it at first, second, and finally passed. Is there any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, read it first, second, and finally passed this date. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Bylaw number 2023-0052 to permanently close and convey an unopened municipal highway. This bylaw is to authorize a road closure, a road allowance closure, and transfer that was approved by council in November of 2022. It was awaiting on a plan of survey for completion. Look for a motion to move that bylaw. Moved by Councillor Hicks, seconded by Councillor Deputy Mayor Calver. If there's no comments, questions, or concerns, we'll read it. We'll give it the 3 readings. Seeing none, read it first, second, and finally pass this date. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Bylaw 2023-0053 to provide that subsection 50 sub 5 of the Planning Act RSO 1990. Chapter P13 as amended does not apply to certain lands within the town of Greater Napanee. Lift the part lot control of Mill Street. This bylaw is to implement the planning decision authorized under item 12.7. Look for a motion to put it on the floor. Moved by Councillor Hicks, seconded by Councillor Shank. If there's no comments or questions, we'll do the 3 readings. Is there any comments or questions with respect to this bylaw? Seeing none, read a first, second, and finally pass this date. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. New business. Does anybody have any matters of new business this evening? Seeing none. Notice of motions. Are there any notices of motion this evening? Seeing none. Statements by members. Deputy Mayor Calver, go ahead.
Okay, just a few quick little things. This past weekend seen a lot going on in Napanee. The South Fred soccer fields were full with soccer players. The parking lot was overflowing with spectators. North Fred was full of baseball players, which was great. It's wonderful to see a large number of boats being docked at Conservation Park. I had a chance to speak with one of the boaters from Port Hope. They had dinner up at Santorini's and did some shopping around and had nothing but positive comments about our town. Music by the River was well attended on Sunday, and the movie night sponsored by the Napanee District Rod and Gun Club was a good turnout too, roughly about 140, 150 people for that movie. I'd like to put out a special thank you to L&A Dairy producers for supplying the chocolate milk, and a huge thank you to Annie and Bethany. They did a great job getting everything all set up, and everything was great for the kids. Everybody there was having a great time, and I would really like to put a big shout out for our OPP for keeping everybody safe. There was an incident that took place down there, and they responded extremely quick, dealt with the matter, problem solved. It was absolutely amazing to see them looking after us. So just another reminder that the fair is fast approaching for August 4th to 7th.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Calver. Is there any other comments or questions, or sorry, statements by members? Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, I just want to give my heartwarming thanks to the CAO, Mr. Pinsent, and Interim Treasurer Nicole Davidson for all the work that they've done here. There's been a lot of changes going through here, and I'm sure that both of you will be missed. I know that there was some push and tug with within some of us, but I'm coming around. So that's all I can say. I resist things, but after a while it comes around. So, but anyway, with all kidding aside, I really appreciate working with you both, and I wish you the best in the future.
Thanks, Councillor Purnell. You stole my thunder, but that's okay. Is there any other comments or questions? Statements by members. I as well would like to thank Mr. Pinsent and Ms. Davidson for the work and that they've provided to our municipality. It's always sad to see people go, and again, change is sometimes difficult for a lot of us, especially us old guys. And I'm now going to put myself into that old guy category. So, and Councillor Purnell is absolutely right. We've seen a lot of change over the course of the past 2 years, and a lot of it has been good change. We still have a lot of work to do, but we'll get there. But I just want to wish Mr. Pinsent, I want to wish Ms. Davidson all the best in their future endeavors. I know that you're going to succeed, you're going to do well, and thank you on behalf of council and the community for doing the work that you did. So thank you very much. On to CAO remarks.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have anything to follow that up with other than maybe one day in the fall, you might see me on the other side of this council chambers looking for an unscheduled deputation, but probably not. Anyway, thank you. I'd like to especially thank the previous council that actually took a chance on me and hired me. I know we had some interesting discussions, Bob, Dave, and Terry, as we went through that process. It was interesting, and my family and I have decided to stay here in Napanee. And to all of staff, thank you very much. It's been a good go. And for those that come behind me or after me, best of luck and Godspeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pinsent. And we will move on to the forward calendar. I know everybody has had an opportunity to take a look at the forward calendar. Is there any questions or comments or with respect to that calendar moving forward? Seeing none, we'll look for a motion to confirm the proceedings of this evening's meeting. Moved by Councillor Purnell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. We need 3 readings, read at first, second, and finally passed this 25th day of July, 2023. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Look for a motion for adjournment. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Martin. No further comments, questions, concerns. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks, folks, for bearing with us. It was a long and productive evening, and we'll see you in a couple or 3 weeks. Thanks.